August 17th, 1944. A gray dawn broke over the battered French countryside near the village of Falaise. The air hung heavy with smoke and the acrid scent of gunpowder. In the Allied command tent, deep behind the front lines, two figures faced a tension that would define the trajectory of the campaign. Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, eyes blazing with impatience, leaned over the maps strewn across the table. Opposite him, General Bernard Montgomery, meticulous and unyielding, studied the same maps with a patience born of years in the desert and the mud of Europe. "Speed, Bernard," Churchill's voice cracked like a whip. "We must strike while they stagger. Delay will cost us momentum, and momentum is the lifeblood of victory." Montgomery did not flinch. He tapped the map, tracing the routes of the Second Army's armored divisions through hedgerows and shattered villages. "Sir, every hour we rush risks slaughter. My men are exhausted, the terrain unforgiving. A calculated advance will preserve our strength and finish this properly." The room seemed to shrink around their disagreement. Outside, the distant rumble of artillery punctuated the morning silence. Churchill's fingers drummed on the table. This was not mere impatience, it was the reflection of a nation desperate for triumph after years of attrition, bombing, and loss. And Montgomery's caution was no arrogance, it was discipline carved from decades of military campaigns. Both men understood what was at stake. The Falaise Pocket could end the German presence in Normandy or trap the Allies in a bloody quagmire. Victory was within grasp, but the cost depended on the philosophy of command. Churchill demanded boldness, a strike that would electrify the public and shatter enemy morale. Montgomery demanded prudence, an advance that would secure the army's integrity and minimize needless deaths. The clash was inevitable, and in that cold morning tent, history waited with bated breath, knowing that the words exchanged here could not be undone.
The days preceding this confrontation had been a relentless test of endurance and nerve. Following the D-Day landings of June 6, 1944, the Allies had fought inch by inch through Normandy's hedgerows, the bocage twisting into a lethal labyrinth. Churchill, stationed in London, had watched the reports with mounting frustration. Every communiqué from Montgomery, every field report of careful consolidation or delayed advance, felt to him like an opportunity slipping through his fingers. In London, the newspapers were filled with cautious optimism, but the public craved a decisive blow, an image of tanks surging, towns liberated, the enemy broken. Montgomery, however, moved to a different rhythm. He had earned his reputation in North Africa, commanding massive formations with painstaking precision. For him, a reckless advance was a betrayal of the lives entrusted to his care. He studied intelligence briefings, the positions of the 7th and 21st Panzer Divisions, and the labyrinthine network of German escape routes. "Sir," he had written in a cable to Eisenhower, "every misstep now risks collapsing our front and allowing the enemy to regroup. Prudence, not haste, will end this campaign successfully." Churchill, meanwhile, saw this as the moment to assert the moral and political weight of command. In private notes to his military secretaries, he described the need for decisive, visible action that will revive the nation's courage. To him, the war was as much about perception as about the battlefield. Victory could inspire millions, while delay, even a measured, careful strategy, risked demoralization. Their conflict was a study in contrasting philosophies. Churchill equated courage with audacity, believing that bold strokes could paralyze the command and ignite Allied morale. Montgomery equated courage with meticulousness, understanding that rash movements could annihilate entire divisions. Neither man doubted the other's commitment. Their disagreement was not personal, but philosophical, a battle over how history should remember the liberation of Europe. In correspondence with his aides, Churchill emphasized the urgency. "We have the Germans by the throat. Now is the time to squeeze, not to tiptoe." Montgomery's responses were terse but resolute. "Patience is not timidity. Discipline is not cowardice. The men will only move when conditions permit, lest we trade one catastrophe for another." The tension between the two men echoed across the Allied command. Eisenhower, caught between the Prime Minister's insistence and Montgomery's prudence, felt the weight of both expectation and responsibility. Outside the tent, the thunder of artillery and the cries of soldiers reminded all that these were not abstract debates. Each word, each decision rippled outward with irreversible consequence. By mid-August, as the Falaise Pocket began to constrict, the divergence between political urgency and military caution had reached a boiling point. Churchill's impatience could not be assuaged. Montgomery's caution could not be overridden. The stage was set for a confrontation that would decide not only the timing of the advance, but the moral weight of command itself.
August 19, 1944. By late afternoon, the sun dipped behind ragged clouds over Normandy, casting long shadows across the scarred countryside. Inside Montgomery's command post, radios crackled with reports of German movements, the occasional burst of gunfire echoing through the nearby woods. Churchill arrived unannounced, accompanied by his military secretary, his coat damp with the mist and mud of the field. His presence was electric, a storm entering a carefully measured calm. Montgomery rose to greet him, composed but alert. His staff stiffened, sensing the tension that had been simmering for days. Churchill wasted no preamble. "Bernard," he said, voice low but firm, "we cannot afford delays. The Germans are disorganized, yes, but disorganization is fleeting. We strike now and we strike hard. Hesitation will cost lives, yes, but inaction will cost far more." Montgomery placed a hand on the map. "Prime Minister, the routes are constrained, the villages are fortified. Panzer remnants are withdrawing in pockets, but they will fight to the last in narrow passes. My orders are clear. Advance only when the units are ready. To rush is to invite disaster." Churchill's eyes narrowed. "We do not have the luxury of perfection. Boldness is the weapon of nations in peril. Do you think the people of Britain will applaud measured prudence when Paris waits to be freed?" Montgomery's reply was deliberate. "Sir, I have never confused the applause of the public with the success of a campaign. My duty is to my men, to the objective, and to history. A premature strike could cost thousands of lives and allow the enemy to escape entirely. That is the alternative you propose." The air in the room thickened with unspoken tension. Outside, columns of Allied armor crept cautiously through the countryside, each tank a fragile embodiment of strategy and human endurance. Churchill, frustrated but resolute, leaned over the map, tracing potential routes with his finger. "Every hour we wait, the Germans regroup. Every hour we wait, the window narrows. I will not accept delay as a strategy. Your caution is admirable, but indecision is fatal." Montgomery did not flinch. He had faced storms of criticism before, from the press, from political leaders, from generals who prized audacity over discipline. "Sir," he said quietly, "the troops will move when I give the order, not before. That is the cost of responsibility." The confrontation, though devoid of personal insult, radiated intensity. It was a collision of visions, one of political urgency, one of calculated precision. Letters and cables from London demanded action. Dispatches from the front demanded patience. The The two men, emblematic of their nation's philosophies, stood at the intersection of history and command. By evening, the Prime Minister retired to his quarters, his mind racing with what-ifs. Montgomery returned to his maps, planning the next day's movements with the steady resolve of a man who knew that in war, timing could mean the difference between glory and ruin. Neither man had yielded, neither would. And yet, in the shadows of Normandy, the die was being cast for a decision that could not be reversed.
August 20th, 1944. The morning mist clung to the hedgerows like a shroud over the Falaise region. From the air, Allied reconnaissance planes reported scattered German formations retreating toward the Seine, but pockets of resistance remained stubbornly entrenched. Churchill, unable to contain his urgency, arrived once more at Montgomery's forward command post. The Prime Minister's eyes were sharp, scanning maps and radios with the intensity of a man who had witnessed too many opportunities slip away. "Bernard," he said, voice taut with impatience, "I must insist. Orders to advance, now. Do not wait for perfection. Perfection will kill us." Montgomery's gaze, calm and unyielding, met Churchill's. "Sir, I will not issue orders until my divisions are properly aligned. Any premature movement will fragment our lines and leave men exposed. I bear responsibility for every life lost under my command." Churchill leaned closer, lowering his voice but raising the stakes. "We are on the cusp of breaking the German front. Hesitation now could allow their escape, and with it years of bloodshed extended. I will not have caution dictate the fate of nations. Bold action is required. Bold action, Bernard." Montgomery's hands remained steady on the table. "Boldness without preparation is recklessness. My judgment will not be swayed by impatience. We will advance, but only when conditions permit. That is the decision I must make." In that charged silence, the enormity of command became palpable. Outside, the distant booms of artillery punctuated the stillness, the sound of men risking life for strategy. Churchill's eyes flicked to the radio operators reporting enemy movements. Every delayed hour was a calculated gamble, every misstep a potential tragedy, and yet he could not force Montgomery's hand. By noon, the Prime Minister had left, issuing a terse warning. The eyes of Britain, the morale of the nation, and the future of Europe hung in the balance. Montgomery convened his corps commanders. His tone was precise, almost ritualistic, as he outlined the advance. Every regiment, every armored column, every infantry battalion would move according to a timetable calculated to minimize exposure to counterattack. Discipline, not haste, would dictate the pace. The decision, once made, was irreversible. Orders were dispatched, tanks rumbled through the narrow lanes, infantry followed behind, and artillery pieces moved with calculated precision. The German forces, caught between the tightening noose of the Falaise Pocket and the methodical advance of the Allies, began to collapse. Thousands were captured, others killed or scattered. The Allies had the advantage, but only because one man refused to bend to the urgency of political pressure, choosing responsibility over immediate glory. Montgomery knew the cost. He had delayed the decisive moment to save lives, but he also risked criticism from his own government and the impatient public. Churchill, in London, could only watch the advance unfold, aware that the triumph might not appear as bold in the headlines, but that it would achieve its ultimate purpose, the destruction of the German position in Normandy. In that tense, irreversible decision, history observed the collision of politics and strategy, audacity and discipline, ego and duty. The path chosen could not be undone, and the Falaise Pocket would soon testify to the consequences of both courage and caution. By the evening of August 21st, 1944,
The Falaise Pocket had tightened to a lethal corridor barely 12 miles wide. Montgomery's meticulously calculated advance had forced the Germans into a trap, their retreat funneled and chaotic, leaving columns of men and materiel stranded along the roads. Churchill, watching from London through reports and radio dispatches, received news of the encirclement. Victory, he realized, had arrived, not through audacious leaps into danger, but through the measured discipline he had once deemed frustratingly slow. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Estimates placed 50,000 German troops trapped inside the pocket. Tens of thousands surrendered, while many others were cut down in the hedgerows or captured along the roads to Chambois and Trun. Allied casualties, though significant, were far lower than they would have been under a hasty assault. Tanks, artillery, and infantry had been preserved, ready for the next phase of the push toward Paris. Montgomery had held the line between prudence and necessity, and the results were undeniable. Churchill, in his private notes, acknowledged the outcome with reluctant admiration. "Bernard's patience has yielded triumph," he wrote. "It is a victory that speaks not only to strategy, but to the discipline of command. Yet one wonders how history will remember the man who waited while opportunity called." In private correspondence with his aides, he admitted that his own urgency had almost forced a reckless advance, one that could have shattered both morale and divisions alike. Across the Allied forces, reactions were mixed but deeply respectful. Eisenhower noted in his diary that Montgomery had balanced the weight of political expectation with the rigor of military prudence, a rare feat. Field officers praised the general's ability to maintain cohesion under the relentless pressure of both the enemy and the Prime Minister. Even among the troops, though the pace had seemed slow at times, the lives saved and the clear victory fostered a sense of disciplined pride rather than frantic triumphalism. The Falaise Pocket marked a turning point. German forces in Normandy were effectively destroyed, and their ability to resist in Western Europe was critically weakened. The psychological impact on both the Allies and the Germans was profound. The illusion of German invincibility had shattered, while the Allies gained not only a strategic advantage, but also confidence in their command structures. Churchill's demand for audacity had not been ignored. It had been reframed, tempered by the realities of the battlefield and the moral weight of leadership. In retrospect, the confrontation between Churchill and Montgomery embodies the eternal tension between political imperatives and military discipline. One sought immediacy, the other precision. One risked spectacle, the other lives. Their conflict was not personal, but philosophical, a testament to the complexity of command in war. The victory at Falaise was irreversible, cementing the principle that true triumph often requires patience as much as boldness. And so, as the sun set over Normandy, the battered landscape bore witness to a lesson that would endure far beyond the war, that in the crucible of human conflict, decisions made under pressure define the fate of nations, and once made, cannot be undone.